So the last time you and I had a conversation was actually, as you reminded me, pre-COVID. And I find myself talking about you more often than you would think. And the reason I do is that there are so many people who are expressing different types of anxiety and fears and loss.
Yes.
And when the loss factor comes up, I think I know they need to see Barbara because somebody did this for me. And I think the idea of somebody who has this ability to connect through this thin veil that is between here and there is really an extraordinary blessing and help. And there you are. You appear.
I'm available.
You come right out of the LED wall.
I know. I feel so at home here. I think afterwards I may just slip on back up there.
Exactly. So you float away.
It's so interesting because I consider that I have an agent up there. And they bring the people they want to speak to and they have information for. And sometimes you'll think, well, so-and-so is going to call you. And then they don't. But a year later, they do.
Mm-hmm.
Because many times the loved ones on the other side or the guides, there's more things to happen here or they're not ready to come through. It's not like a phone where I can just call them and say, okay, I receive these things. Mm-hmm. So I kind of at the mercy of that. But I've seen in my own life the miracles that happen with this work and how people are transformed. Many times, very pragmatic, practical people, and then they lose someone in a devastating way, and they're desperate enough to come to someone like me. And I think because I'm so mainstream and I'm so very grounded, they feel comfortable. You know, if I had on a turban and patchouli oil, I think they'd be a little nervous.
A little star
they go, okay.
Hanging from,
But they, I've seen it change lives, and people realize that the death transition is just transition. You don't kill a soul cannot be killed. And then as they open up, there's loved ones can start to come through to them, either through their dreams or, you know, somebody's had a dream about your dad and he said this. So it does open up the portal for them to receive even more and start to realize there's more here than what we see.
Well, one thing that I learned from you, and it's a great lesson, was to pay attention to everything, because what you may or may not think is just a simple, and for example, this weekend, there were friends at our house and there was this bird that just stayed around. It didn't fly away. It just kept hovering around, hanging around, and an extraordinary amount of time, but never, whatever we did, people could get up, come back. The bird was still kind of, and it was doing this rocking thing and hanging around. And I said, which is why I said it's so peculiar, because your name comes up usually from me saying, you know, it may or may not be, but one of us definitely has a friend here who doesn't want to leave and wants us to know they're here. And I guess one of us will realize in some way how that bird connected with them. Now, I didn't feel the bird connected with me, but I felt that that bird was definitely staying around much longer than I've ever seen any bird stay around.
Butterflies, birds, there are things like that.
There were butterflies too, by the way.
Messengers. And because you speak the language now, you know it's more than just a bird happened to be there.
Yeah.
You're like, okay, there's a reason for this. I'm not sure what it is. There's a message here. And red birds are always heaven sent. That's what they say. Always heaven sent. And I funny you say birds, because I was speaking with a client this past weekend, and she said, I just had to call you to tell you something. And yes, I do the mediumship work, but I also, some of the mundane things that people are worried about. So she had called me, and they had moved from Oregon back to New York, and she flew with the kids, and then her husband drove the car. Well, he had the pets. Well, he opened the back, and the bird flew out. The parrot flew out.
Oh my God.
Gone, just gone in Nebraska. So she called me. She goes, and so I tuned in and I said, you're going to get the bird back. She thought, you are crazy. How would I ever get this bird back? It's a little parrot. So her daughter went online and found out a veterinarian near there, called the veterinarian. The veterinarian said, you know, these people brought a bird in that had been, was being attacked by an eagle. I'll call them. It was the bird. Husband drove back out, got the bird, and now the bird's home. And she said, I thought you were crazy. I couldn't imagine how this could ever be, but the bird's home.
Some practical.
So they're like little things, you know, like, oh, I can't find my mother's wedding ring. And they'll call me and you know, sometimes I get it. Sometimes I don't get anything on it, but sometimes I get it. And then I get the call, thank you. But it's because these things are meant to be found. This bird was not done yet with that family.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, that is very interesting. And one more of these before we get into sort of the more in-depth work you do. Right. But I remember my dog, Zeke, the last dog I have, and I have Wally.
The one that liked naked.
Yeah. Yes. And after you told me what you thought he was thinking about or whatever was going on in his head, and dachshunds have a head that stuff is going on in. And I thought, I don't know, this is really stretching it, Barbara. I'm not quite sure about this. But I realized that there was something going on there. And I sort of was silent about it. Right. And now that I have Wally is very obvious about his communication with me more than any, and I've had quite a few dachshunds. And I remembered how you spoke about the dog and their kind of relationship with human beings and what they're thinking. And it's really fascinating that I am positive Wally is very present, and even Marty thinks this dog is having like a real interaction with us on another level. And Marty's the farthest from wanting to believe any of it.
Wally.
Yeah, no, he didn't even want Wally, but he also would never even think that, but it's so obvious. Where your work really is incredibly helpful is when there's a loss, and it's shaking somebody's life, and I will use my brother as an example. So my brother and I were very close, and my brother had a troubled life of drugs and alcohol, and at a certain point in his life, he just wanted to be away from me. Right. And he came into some money. I think he sued the city or something for tripping or whatever. And he took that money and he left. And I didn't know where he was. I didn't know where he was going. I begged him not to. But he did. And then I knew I was going to hear about something not good. And when he died, the detective that found him couldn't even find contact information. She had to go through the army and all of that to get a contact. Finally, she did. And she told me, she said, would you like me to describe what we found? She did. And I spoke with you before that, and and before I found out everything. Right. And you told me everything about where he lived, what was going on. You told me everything, and then the detective said the same thing. And I thought, this is really wild. But you told me more. You told me what he was thinking about, what his life was like, what he was thinking now that he passed. And I had ashes, and you also suggested that he probably would like them thrown either in the ocean or, and so I didn't think I would ever be able to focus again after this. I didn't think I would be able to do my work or anything. And the way you walked through how I should deal with it, just not as an instruction, but what he said for me to know, brought me to a place where once I threw his ashes and at sunset, the whole thing, as soon as that happened, I felt a wash of calm. And I don't know that I would have been able to do that as well without some help, guidance from the guides. So I think, first of all, what everybody would love to know is, well, how do you do that? Like, what the heck? And more about that kind of work you do.
I've done this for a long time, but I was sensitive and an empath before I ever even knew I could do any of this. And I developed it because it just felt right to do. It's not a career. It's just something, it's like a talent. You develop it. And so I realized I'm tremendously honored to do the work. And I always say, when people write, I would say, I'll be honored to read for you, because it's an honor to work with spirit, to be chosen, and to have my guides be so clear to me. But they really do see us struggling, and they want to help. Part of your brother, I think part of his mission was to make it okay for you, and to make sure the words, his guides the words came through me that would comfort you, because it's a universal truth. We all die. But there are those of us that are here that there were so many questions for you that you wouldn't be able to get answered by talking to him, even if he had lived.
Yeah.
And because he couldn't heal here, they took him home to heal there. And there's no stigma to that at all. And you can have as many lifetimes as you want and work on as much as you want, from what I understand. So I feel honored because I know that people are in pain. The good part is most of it has nothing to do with me. So I can let it come through, and people take it and they go and they're happy and whatever. And I've done a good thing. And then I go on with my life. Because sometimes in the beginning, I would carry the sadness because I've heard some incredibly difficult things.
Right.
And then there's some that are joyful. There are some joyful things. But by and large, people need to know their loved one is okay. And the way I always see it is, your mom and Bill have set a lovely place for you on the other side at the dinner table. And when it's your time, you'll go over. Or on the front porch, there's like a lovely chair for you that overlooks a vista. It continues. There's healing. There's closure. Because you had no closure with this.
Yeah.
And you couldn't work with him.
Yeah.
So it's one of those things where sometimes divine intervention is the only thing that can resolve anything and fix it.
Yeah. I think he knew that he was ready to go, which is why he left. And,
lately I've had a couple of clients, older men, that have sons that committed suicide that were in high school. And one was an fentanyl overdose, which was not necessarily intentional, but there aren't any accidents.
No.
And the other was miserable and a deliberate. He was a beautiful boy, captain of the football team. I mean, one of these like all-American kids. And yet no one could fix this pain in him. And he did it. And it destroys everyone else around. And many times these souls, they don't come down for the long run. You know, this is one of the first times in history where people lived to be in their 90s.
Yeah. Yeah.
Most of the time we come, and there was no word for menopause because no one lived long enough to go through it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it was just it's a different time.
Right.
But the pain of someone, and you realize, okay, their karma was their souls want them to wake up on the earth plane and see that there's more. So it took some kind of loss like that. And many times it happens to people who have done that in a past life themselves. So they're on the other side of the lesson this time to balance the karma.
Yeah. Oh, interesting.
And it's hard to say that to someone. They're like, well, I would have never done that. Or, you know, well, you just think in the 1600s, you might have.
Yeah.
Or in 450 BC, you ran off that mountain, you know?
Yeah.
So you realize that it's all, there's this like sort of brilliant divine blueprint with what we go through and how we go through it.
I think a big question is probably what are the mechanics of what you do? And I know that we've had this conversation, and
it's not easy being me. I say that, and because I try to be your everyday grounded person that, you know, I'm up on the news, I'm up on social things, but I have this other thing that I have to honor. So I have to eat right. And I have to be able to be peaceful, and I have to be calm, and I don't drink. I don't do drugs. I do all the things to keep my body strong, because what I do is there's a lot of light that comes through. You notice I'm very white in the front, and spirit, all that psychics get very white because all that light's coming through the top of my head all the time and wishing out. But I have to keep myself to a certain standard to be able to be strong enough to do the work and to be able to handle it. And the most miraculous part of it is I can be having a day of doubt and fear and trepidation, and I tune in and it all goes away. All that noise goes away. And even though there are days where I'll go, what if it doesn't happen like that today?
Yeah.
But it does.
Yeah.
It does. And it tunes me. So I kind of have to do this. I don't think there's a retirement plan for psychics.
No.
I think we just hang in, you know, and then we go to the light. But I see now more than ever, there's a lot more people doing the work, which thrills me. There are people reaching, because if you define yourself by what's out there, you will never, ever, you'll be miserable.
Yeah.
You have to look up and talk to God, Goddess, whatever higher force you believe in. And you have to look in your heart and your authenticity. You have to follow your truth.
So when you're with someone and you explain what happens. So somebody comes to see you.
Well, what I do is when I set the appointment, I get their full birth name and full birth date, because there's a lot of Mary Joneses out there. So I make sure that I tune in to the right person. So I spend about an hour before the reading getting the space ready, lighting candles, getting, into the vibe and tuning to that soul. So when they come, they will come in, and sometimes their guides come ahead of them. I'll see them milling around the apartment, looking at my stuff, thinking to make sure I'm not a psycho or some crazy person. And the table doesn't levitate. There's no crazy thing like that. And they come in, and I had this brother and sister one time, and I'd never had this happen before. There was nobody there. So we were talking for a minute or two. Then all of a sudden, this woman popped in, and I said, "Was your mother always late?" And they said, "Yes." And I went, "As above, as below." Yeah. And so, because it never has failed me, they're always there, because I know it's the work I'm doing for spirit.
Yeah.
So I get myself to a certain frequency, because the higher I vibrate, they have to vibrate low and I have to vibrate high to match, to meet on that level. But I work with the angelic realm, and I don't see bad things. I mean, spirit sees things as challenges, but I don't scare anybody. Nobody leaves feeling lousy. And they said to me once, "You're a healer. You're psychic and a medium, but you're a healer. And the reason your readings are powerful is because it's not like, oh, Aunt Tessie left her pearls under the sink. It's so much more psychological, so much more healing on a soul level." Yeah. So that's why, but I have to keep myself at a certain level. And if I don't, I better get up there real quick when I have to work.
Yeah. And so if your frequency is going high and theirs is going low to kind of
Connect us.
match, what type of symbolism do you connect to, or what's the communication?
Well, I do pray a lot. I have to say that. And it's not necessarily the Catholic prayers that I was raised with, although I do say those too.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes it's just a nice talk to God, as I live a half a block from Central Park, at which I think God is always in Central Park.
Mm-hmm.
So I have a little chat with the higher beings, but I do a series of prayers and chants and tuning in. You'll see me bless the space, because when you channel, spirits can say they're from anywhere. If it's not pure, I have what we call a doorkeeper, which means my angels do not let them mess with me. They're like, standing around me and keeping the space so sacred. But I will always bless the space before I work. And if I'm doing pendulum or no matter where I am or what I do, I always bless the space. And then I sit down and I call in the higher frequencies and the higher beings for the highest good of all concerned and for the client's highest good.
Mm-hmm.
So I know and trust that I will deliver exactly what I'm supposed to deliver. No less, and certainly not more than they can tolerate. And it always seems to be, because it's already, I've already said so in the beginning, that's how the session will go.
I remember the first time I met you was really following up on a gift that had been given to me when my mother died.
Oh,
so somebody passed you forward, and I'd really never been into psychics, because I've met 2 or 3 that just seemed that the world was not as big as the world, so they couldn't understand more.
Right.
And so the perspective was small or different.
Right.
And so when I did go, you were, as you said, the environment was very calm and you could feel a good energy. But there was a point where I remember you said something about your mother doesn't like your hair like that. And you pointed the way she did. And that would be, she always had something to say about my hair.
Right.
And she did this. And I thought, oh my God.
It's like, hi, Mom.
So, I mean, the not only the gestures, but the phrasing or just some.
Well, I'm clairaudient, clairsentient. I mean, sometimes I smell things and that triggers the psychic. Sometimes I see things. Sometimes it's almost like a ticker tape going by. There's all different ways that they work with me, depending on the vibration of the person and what needs to come through.
Right.
Now, I'm sure it was as big a surprise to you as it was to your mother to be in the room, because I'm sure she wouldn't have gone to psychics
she probably would have.
Or
she probably was the first one in the room.
But the healing of that to just to be able to know there's something so specific. And I'm blessed. I get a lot of specifics. I don't take any credit. It's my spirit guides. It's the angels.
It's an extraordinary amount of specifics. And that's what I tell people, is that it could be the littlest thing, but it is so unique that when you say it, you think the person will say, oh, okay, I'm in a safe place. This feels
She's tuned to the right channel.
Yeah. And I remember after Robert Isbell died and I came to see you, he introduced the idea of Marty to me when we were friends, and Marty was married at the time. And I was like, I have no interest in married men. And he said, this is the guy for you. And then he died. And he did not introduce me to Marty, our
while
joint,
he was here.
But while he was here. But our mutual friend introduced me to Marty.
Aww.
And the interesting thing is, when I saw you, he explained to me that he, in fact, had something to do with that introduction
Okay.
because it was a friend of both of ours. So that was very interesting too, that the continuation of our conversation while he was here to after he passed was like, this is what happened. So it's visiting you is this interesting exploration into the here and hereafter. It really is quite extraordinary.
Miracles that have happened in that apartment.
Yeah.
And the people that have sat on my couch that I would never meet in a million years.
Right.
Royalty and celebrities and we're all the same.
Yeah.
We're all just muddling along this lifetime. We're doing the job or the acting role that we came down here to do. And so I'm not starstruck, but the things that come through, if I remember, I don't always remember.
Yeah.
But if I remember, and many times if I'm struggling with something, I'll get a client who they give the messages to that's the same thing. And I get the message and I get the lesson from it. I was raised in a very Catholic family, but my father was a military officer and very straight-laced. So when I was saying I was doing readings, he had no idea what I was talking about, I think. But we had a strong box at the house. I don't think I've ever told you this story. There was this, they called them a strong box back then. And it was my grandmother and grandfather's. And I said, well, they put their special papers. I said, well, what's in there? My father said, we don't know. I said, what do you mean you don't know? He said, well, when your grandfather died in 1986, the key went with him. We don't know where it is. We've looked and looked forever. I went, really? And I kind of tuned in and I asked them and they said, walk across the room. I walked across the room. There was a high boy, those high boy dressers. I pulled out, I went way back in there and I pulled a little string and out came a key.
No.
And I walked over and I opened it.
No.
And so the colonel said, how'd you do that? How did you do that? I go, that's why they pay me the big bucks, Dad. This is what I do.
That is so funny.
Because for someone like that, because I had given him the book, Many Lives, Many Masters, I was trying for him to understand a little bit better.
It's a big ask, Barbara.
It is huge. But I'm so grateful I had such grounded, down to earth people.
Yeah.
It's made a difference because I have to hold myself. I can't go floating off into this.
Yeah.
I have to kind of stay centered to do the work. And I'm so glad that I had that. But one of my father's sayings was always, there is no compromising with truth. Things are true and that's what they are. And I guess I so much hear that right now in this world because there's so much acceleration, but there's so much craziness out there that, if you're not a strong person and you don't have a core and you don't trust your own instincts,
and have the roots.
You will get really thrown around and who knows what to believe and all the misinformation and all. So I find that, and I tell my clients this too, there are days where you need to have silence, not even music, not even anything distracting you, quiet and rest.
Yeah.
And don't feel the least bit guilty about saying, I've got to go home and rest now.
Yeah.
Or I'm taking a me day.
Yeah.
And because it's too much.
I've been hearing more and more people saying they take naps. I did a podcast with Rick Owens, who's an amazing designer, and he said, I take naps. Yeah. And I thought, oh, wow, that sounds weird, but you know what? It's not. It's really it's doing rebooting. What your body is telling you. It's restoration. And more people are saying that. And I think that whether it's sleep or some form of restoring. One of the things I remember we had a conversation and I asked you if in your own private life you're in an interaction with someone and you sort of get a little vision about something. Right. Did that ever happen?
It comes out, yes. I mean, if I'm out to brunch with my girlfriends.
Give us a good story.
Oh my gosh. If I'm out to brunch with my girlfriends, it will come out. I was at my farm and I was having lunch with a bunch of people sitting around the table. See this guy, spirit there. And I said, was there ever, and this is my mom was alive, I said, was there ever a guy, and this was what he looked like, and da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And she said, my grandmother took in this young orphan boy, and he didn't live very long. He died in an accident. And I said, and she says, well, I think we have a picture of him.
No.
Yes, indeed. She went in the drawer and because we have a million things in the house, got this picture of this fellow, and that's who it was.
Wow.
And I saw him go by, but it's almost like you don't want to freak everybody out and go, oh, there's a spirit in here. And so I just, was there ever? But if I'm out to lunch with girlfriends and I can tell I have great gaydar, excellent gaydar. And I'll say, I think you should go for that guy because he's gay. Or I don't think he's the one. And sometimes it upsets them, but then I'm always right.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's not me. It's spirit coming through to say, here's a warning. There's a little warning here. Mm-hmm. Be a little careful. But things like that do happen. It's like, because I can't turn it off completely.
Yeah.
It's sort of there.
Yeah. So have you ever met somebody and got a little signal that this person is just not the fit for you?
Unfortunately, yes. Right. And there's someone that twice in my life, I kind of joke now. I go, I have more ex-boyfriends over there than here. And many of them, the ones that, one of my great loves, would have been dying the same time my parents were dying had we gotten married. And he died of Parkinson's, and he died young. And, I always understand why spirit, it's like, okay, God, I work for you. I do that. Can't you let me have what I want? Well, sometimes what you want is not what's best for you and not what's right for you.
Interesting.
And so, and he passed away. And I thought, I'd be a really young widow and probably miserable. And so at least now I look back on the time with him as really special. Yeah. And he comes in my dream. He knocks paintings off the wall in my apartment sometimes. The day that he died, the painting fell off from over. It's anchored. There's no way it should be falling off.
Wow.
And it went, whoop. I went, oh, hi, you're here. You're here.
So when you see an image, what does that image look like? Is it like the movies, like ghosts in a movie, or what is it you see?
It's in my third eye. Like my farm is right on the Mason-Dixon line. They would try to come into my county because it's seceded from the Union. St. Mary's and Charles and Calvert all seceded from the Union.
Oh, right.
So the troops, they had to get there. So we had troops camped out on our land. Then we're talking the 1800s. We're talking, and the fields have been plowed for many, many years since then. But I'll see sometimes a Civil War soldier in the front walking the yard.
And does it look
I found musket balls.
Yeah. And does this soldier look like a real person, or is it an image, or
more like a holograph? I would say more like a holograph, and no one else can see him. But I see that one. Oh, this is another story. One night, they did a thing for John Lennon at Strawberry Field.
Right.
So I went there with a friend, and we were standing there, and it was all these young kids who were never born when the Beatles were playing every bit of their music and really lovely.
My God.
And I hear this, psst, hey. And I'm like, yeah. And I look up, and sitting on the limb is John Lennon and George Harrison. And I thought, and I go, well, what do you think of this? What do you guys think of this? They're playing your music.
Wow.
And they said, it's so much more beautiful than we could have ever done it because they play it with such love.
Wow.
These guys had no idea what they created. But it was the craziest thing because they were sitting up there on the limb, and I couldn't say to this person I was with, hey, guess what?
Right. They would start bringing in the paddy wagon for you.
They think I was nuts. But what they had to say and what drew them to that energy was the love.
Yeah. I mean, if they were going to be anywhere, that would definitely.
They just wrote some songs and sang their songs and, had their own issues and whatever. But to see that the love of these songs and these kids that and they're still out there. I don't know if you ever go up there. They're out there all the time. Yeah. And they put flowers out all the time. And then, of course, for his birthday and when he passed, they do a ceremony.
That's so nice. It really is. I
but
mean,
it's like, oh my God.
That was a good one. That was, I think the idea that the soul lives on.
Yes.
Is so, I mean, for me, I find it consoling and positive, right?
I had to get very quiet in my mind and very peaceful in order to reach that place where I could hear them. And the world is so loud now. And there's so much discord.
Yeah.
That it needs to get a little calmer so people can connect to their higher selves and to their guides.
Yeah.
That little aha moment where you cannot explain the coincidence. It's a complete, it's heaven sent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But the idea that we all, have this ability to move,
Yes.
keep evolving and going on. And the idea of this accumulation of life experiences where you have a chance to be better, evolve to a higher plane is so wonderful. I mean, not that you're going to just make a mess here.
So much of what comes through me is there's such love. The guides, they're funny and there's such love that comes through. People feel it. They feel seen and they feel loved.
Yeah.
And when they're in the space and I'm doing the work, it's amazing. And because they say that's the greatest of all is love.
Now, since we spent time with each other,
right?
So much has happened, but it feels probably like the most negative time I've ever experienced in my lifetime. And I'm wondering if you're getting any feedback from the other side in just through conversations.
There is a karma at play on the earth plane now. And those who are astrologers have done the chart of this country, and they say that the birthing of this country, that it's in the same time energy of the Revolutionary War.
Yeah.
So we have the opportunity to either go forward or regress. And people don't want to elect somebody who takes things away from them. Why would somebody who's taking everything, that cut this, cut that, why would anyone vote for that person?
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense. And all tyrants do fall. But it's not just this country. It's a global level. It's all around us. Now, there's no accident that we incarnated to be here now, because it's more important than ever that you anchor the light and the truth, and the work that you do is amazing.
Yeah.
With healing and everything that you've been doing. And so you have to remember that, okay, the boat's rocky, but I got to stay centered and I've got to do my work, and I have to, whenever possible, be as kind as possible.
Yeah, that seems to be the word. I feel like I totally agree that I think that there are two opinions with subtle shades of gray, right? The country and the world, you're right. Europe is in the same, not everywhere in the world, but there's a lot of this, two opinions and no tolerance for accepting another person's opinion or accepting another person's point of view. And I have in the entrance to our apartment, I have a Martin Luther King quote on the wall, which really just refers to the fact that when we know each other, we can no longer hate each other.
Right.
And the fact that whether it's the news, the way we get information is all based on tearing down the other side. And I don't think any side is any better. I think we're all guilty, and social media just fires it up.
Yep.
And I am so concerned about that, and that I just don't want to hate anybody, even if I don't agree with
Well, you're
their
a very
opinion.
well-traveled being. You have been to lots of other countries and cultures. So you're not prejudiced. You see us all as everybody's the same race, the human race, trying to like slog along. And I think a lot of this is stirred up by people who have not traveled or experienced other cultures, are threatened by foreign energies, foreign people.
Or just even neighbors. I
Yes.
mean, there are people that are your neighbors that think in a different way. And I've really been trying to reach out to listen to what they're saying. And there's a lot of pain on all sides. There's a lot of concern. And so I think it's very hard to be a leader now when there's this vibration is so intense.
Yes.
But I do believe kindness is really the power.
I mean, they taught me early on just walking and smiling or holding a door for someone or helping someone with a package.
Yeah.
I mean, and the people that see that happen to witness it, they get a healing too.
I agree.
It reverberates all along. And yes, in New York, it's tough because there are people begging all over the place and you're just like, don't bother me, I'm busy.
Yeah.
But then you have to stop and think, all right, if you have to get out and do that, it's worth 50 cents or a dollar or whatever I have in my pocket.
It's so overwhelming that there are so many people that need help that it gets to the point where you wonder, well, how do you do it? What can you do?
Right.
But I think in everyday life, and like you said, just even holding the door for someone, when I was spending a lot of time in the public schools, one of the things we would have a conversation about kindness. And I said, from now on, for the rest of your life, when you get to a door, if there's anybody there, you open it and hold it and always make sure the other person goes through first. And generosity of spirit is really starts to change how you behave and how people feel. Like everybody that you let through that door, it's like, oh, nice kid.
Thank you.
What a great, that was so nice. And it is wrapped up in that. What about meditation for you personally? How does that?
I had a hard time with that because I was very active mind and very active person and I had to really learn to like cut it. I used to fall asleep a lot when I would start it but then the guides would say, it's fine. We get to you.
Yeah.
It's your tuning out and we can get to you that way. And then I would wake up and I'd go, oh my God, I fell asleep. But then I always felt good.
Yeah.
So I think, it's not about an hour a day. It's about, you can do it so quickly.
Yeah.
It can be 5 minutes. It can be 3 minutes.
No, absolutely.
It's realigning and tuning to that higher frequency, remembering who you are.
Yeah. We've done, we do workouts and breath work and meditation. And I remember when we started meditation, everybody would sit down and I'd say, if you want to lie down, whatever you want to do is fine. This is your time. Right. And so we'd have people come in and guide us through meditation. Sometimes we would just sit together.
Right.
But inevitably, the guys would be snoring away. Yes. And it would be like, it's okay.
Yeah.
You know what? It's absolutely okay.
You get it no matter what. Because you set the intention and sometimes they knock you out so they can get through.
So if somebody is doing a meditation or prayer or breath work or anything, even walking, like you said, you have Central Park right in your little piece of heaven. Is there something that they can do, especially if somebody's passed in their lives?
Right.
And they're maybe afraid, they're not ready yet to have that connection. So there are several people that have had people pass, and I've mentioned you to them. And they say, I'm not ready yet, but it sounds really good, but I'm not ready yet. I have to just deal with what's happening. Right. So what do you recommend for them? Like, how do
to
you
start to first of all, to rest? They've been through an enormous ordeal to lose someone you love, and all circumstances, no matter whether they had a long passing with cancer or whether they got hit by a bus, it's still hard.
Yeah.
And to start to listen and start to notice that penny on the ground, and you pick it up. This is my personal thing, and look at the date on the penny. And it'll give you an indication of, oh my God, that's the year we did this,
Right.
or that's when we did that. Or you'll get phantom phone calls where there's nobody there.
Yeah.
Or you'll get, like you'll sit in your house, there's no wind and the plant is moving. Or you'll feel cold pockets around you.
Mm-hmm.
There's so many ways they let us know we're here,
Right.
the birds,
Yeah.
and bees, and of course, butterflies. And to start to listen quietly and notice, because grief is really hard. It kind of shuts everything down. And many times when someone is so in grief, their emotions are so frayed that they will bring it to other people. Like somebody that, like a friend of their daughters will say, I had a dream about so-and-so. And he said this. They'll get the message to you somehow that way.
Yeah.
Because, I've had a visitation from my father. And of course I didn't want him to leave, but I know that kind too. There are visitations where it seems so real.
Yeah.
It happens a lot when you're just waking up, when you're in that twilighty place. But there's a higher power and guides that have been with you since before you decided to even come to this world, who love you and want to guide you through it. You just have to listen. And then sometimes when people can't hear is when they come to me. And then what my guides do, they kind of open that back up a little bit.
Yeah,
because
I think that's very true.
There's just a veil that separates. And, souls, many times they come to you. If they die like at war, they'll come to you.
Yeah.
They will do that. The other thing I've found, social media and the internet and all of that, it's almost like giving us all ADD. It's really rough.
Yeah.
And so what I try to use it for now is this past weekend, I went on a complete Edith Piaf thing where I read everything I could. I rented the movie La Vie en Rose. I will find something or some historic figure that I don't know that much about. And I will have a weekend of learning things.
And what makes you choose these specific, do you think there's any sort of energy that said you need to know about her for some reason?
Her talent was extraordinary. Nothing ever since has there been a voice like that.
Yeah.
But I lived in Germany as a little girl, and I think my parents went to see her when we were in Paris when I was like 6 years old. And I will go home, of course, and go rummaging through all of the stuff in scrapbooks, but there was just something connects me.
Yeah.
Like I have feelings about Thomas Jefferson the same way.
Yeah, that's interesting.
And some not such good people like John Wilkes Booth, because he got his legs set in my hometown and rode right down through my hometown and my farm. So I just find knowledge is so important. To counterbalance all the fear that we're in, you have to balance it out with music, with knowledge, with art. Like I'll go to MoMA and walk around.
It's sort of healing.
You have to, because otherwise, and it's impossible to be sensitive or to be a human and not pick up this stuff. You can't help it.
It's devastating. Do you, talking about Edith Piaf and people of past, do you, ever feel a connection to who you might have been in a past life or
yes,
any of that?
Places, yes, and eras. Just there's certain eras that I just feel like, especially Europe, a lot in London and Paris, those places, Greece, and for some reason I can never get to the Middle East. 3 times I've tried, and 3 times I paid my ticket off and it got canceled.
You shouldn't be there.
It got canceled. And this was the last one was Jordan and Israel.
Wow.
I was supposed to go in May. And of course the trip was canceled because of what happened. And I thought, okay, I get it now. I'll stop rebelling.
Yeah.
I'm not meant to go there. Okay. That's not the part of the world they want me in. So it's like, all right.
Yeah. So what happens if, or would this ever happen if, say I came to just talk to you and something is going on and, but you, pick up something from a past life. Does that ever happen?
Always.
Always.
Always. And I mean, we have thousands of past lives, most of us. So the only ones that matter are the ones that are impinging on the one we're in now.
Yeah.
So a lot of times if you're having trouble in a relationship with someone, and it's ridiculous why there's such miscommunication, or
Right.
a lot of times they'll talk about what happened in that other lifetime and how it got that way. And what you can do, talk to the soul of the person. You can work through it on the astral planes.
Yeah.
Because most of the time you can't say, hey, I'm really sorry I knocked you out and pushed you off a mountain in the 1400s. But you were really, it doesn't, most people don't want to hear that. But if you work on the higher planes, I've seen miracles happen with that.
Yeah.
Miracles.
Fascinating.
But you yourself know when you travel, there are places that you just feel this affinity for.
For me, Bahia.
Right.
When I went to Bahia, I felt so at home, and I went on my birthday. So it was June, and it was hotter than the hottest hot you can imagine. And I was so at home there.
Oh.
The music, the people, the history. I mean, it was a slave trade.
Well, they must have been staring at you like they saw in your aura that they knew
I
you
just felt very comfortable. And the interesting thing is all of the information that was where slaves were traded.
Oh.
And there were big holding pens, jails where slaves were held. And I was obsessed, and I got some jewelry that was from this place.
Right.
And I have the last of my possessions that I didn't totally get rid of was this enormous jewelry collection. And I'm seeing all this jewelry from Bahia. And I don't wear jewelry anymore, but every piece I have is really something I collected with a lot of love. And I look at that jewelry, and I get that energy from Bahia, and I know I'm going to be going back there. I know I'm going to be going back. It will
call you back.
Oh, totally.
Well, whenever you go to a place like that, it activates the consciousness you had when you were there. So that's why portals open, and you just have a different feeling, and you're transformed by the time you get back to the normal life you lead.
Yeah.
Something has opened. A portal has opened.
Yeah.
I went with one of my best friends to Greece, and we went to Delphi, where the oracles were.
Mm-hmm.
And I kept saying to her, I had a dream. I said, who's Theseus? Of course, we looked it up, and he was the king of Athens who used to go to the oracles at Delphi.
Mm-hmm.
And apparently I was one of his favorite oracles at Delphi. But we got there, and it was like the middle of the week, and it was hot, of course. I had this long white, schmata on, this dress. And all of a sudden, the guy that worked there said, you look like Sybil, the first oracle. And my friend who's with me goes, she is an oracle.
That's crazy.
And the whole trip, I had a dream about, I said, what's Patmos? And she said, guess we're going to Patmos. So off we went. That's where St. John the Divine wrote the book of Revelation.
Wow.
But Delphi really, I clicked with. And I go back sometimes in my mind to Delphi. Mm-hmm. So I know I was there. I know I took part in that.
Yeah, there are places where people feel very attracted, and then there are others that you just get the reverse. And Mexico, for me, every time I've ever gone, I've had a bad experience, like really bad, where they take my passport and I'm like a whole crazy stuff. And I was like, I just don't think I should go back there. And, I just, and I can't imagine that. Why Mexico, of all places?
Well, it was very, very powerful. They have pyramids down there and Chichen Itza and all that.
Yeah. So but something's there.
Heaven's saying
to go to.
Better places to go.
Yeah. So in your experience, do you find people are more open to the conversation of what you do than maybe in the past?
Yes.
Yeah.
But I don't tell everybody what I do. I mean, I keep a very low profile. Like it's almost like a club. If you know, you know.
Yeah.
And we'll talk about it. And I'd say all of my friends are spiritual. If you're not spiritual and you don't believe any of this,
well, I think whoever's watching this now probably will have an open mind to it. So
yes,
I think I think that would be, but I think just in general, for quite some time, I would say in the last 10 years for sure.
Yes.
There's more open conversation where it's a normal conversation, not, oh, those kooky people,
And no one has ever said that about me.
No.
Only because I'm so different. No, I'm not new agey.
Yeah. No. And the way you look too, it's just like so out of character that when people get to see you, when they're like, I'll say, you must meet Barbara. And they make an appointment and then they say, as soon as they see you, they go, okay. I don't know what exactly they're expecting, but
I'm so much me. And with spirit, by the time they meet me, I'm already kind of tuned in.
Yeah.
And I'm very humble about the whole experience of it. And then I know people that are not, that do what I do or try to do what I do. But I just find I'd rather work simply on a case by case. I like that way. It affords me to have my time to live. And I don't threaten anybody.
So,
because I look like I look.
Has anybody done have you gone to anybody that you
Starting
trust?
out, yes. People, unless you vibrate higher than I do, you have a hard time reading me. They can't read me. It's like, unless they go higher. So I always feel like I'm teaching them something when I do a reading. And one of my dear ones just passed this last week. Her name is Carol May. And I loved her. And she was a little older. My spiritual teacher passed a couple of years ago. They're all like, I am now the elder.
Oh, wow. Oh, wow.
I'm the elder because there's so many of them that are transitioning. And I just see her filled with light. And she was amazing.
Oh, great.
But every one of us, we work a little differently. And, she a long time ago, I went to her and she could get some really good information.
Wow.
But by and large, I'm not easy to read. And they kind of things I trust that what I'm supposed to know, they tell me in my dreams or somebody will relate something to me. Now, one of the things I do in New York, and I'm saying this because if you're tuned in from New York, when I go out, I go as simple as possible and I surround myself with light and kind of become anonymous and cloak myself because I don't want to be a target. There's so much crime out there and crime for just hitting somebody for no reason, just because there's so much anger and rage. Yep. So I do that. And then of course, my sweetheart, significant other person, of course, if I go to the theater, I have to send a thumbs up text when I get in at night to know that I'm okay.
Yeah.
But I always feel this presence behind me and I'm thinking, who is?
Yeah.
It's my dad.
Yeah. Yeah.
Protecting me. You know how we have the street sense living in New York?
Yeah.
And you kind of know. And I said, well, I was here. I explained to him, I was here in the 80s and 90s. And I mean, I said, and you could run then, Barbara. Yeah. Your knees are not so good. You could run then. And I'm like, yeah. So, but to not be afraid because that's the worst.
Yeah.
And they say such scary things that people get really freaked out.
Yeah.
And are afraid. And it's like, no, just protect yourself.
So why is that happening now? Why is there this sort of it's not I don't want to say evil, but this
Malevolent.
abandonment of,
Malevolent.
abandoning just the feeling of respect and caring about other people. I can't remember a time like this. What happened? What happened in the like the atmosphere? Like what is going on?
Leaders that say horrible things and people think it's funny or it's okay. And then all of a sudden it seeps into the culture where I can say that and, it's okay. And it's like, it's so
but I mean, like,
and ugly.
Attacking people,
right?
Doing things that are just so aggressive. I
and you see it every time you go out in New York City. You see a microcosm. You can tell what's going on in the news and the world by how people act on the streets in New York.
Yeah.
After 9/11, it was dead silent. You just can feel the pulse of what's going on.
Yeah.
And I think that something has unleashed in this country that it's okay to be nasty. It's okay.
Yeah. I think the biggest part of that is social media.
Yes.
Hides people. And so they can say really mean things.
Right.
Like people criticizing a gymnast who's just extraordinary, criticizing her hair and thinking, what, because you can hide behind social media that you can be mean, and this girl should just be adored and cherished.
They always say that ETs find us so fascinating to watch because we build heroes and then we rip them down. It's like, well, what is that?
Yeah, but
she is a phenom.
Yeah, but hiding,
and she's beautiful.
Yeah, and hiding behind social media to do that to people, friends doing it, friends to teenage girls doing it to each other, like the ability to actually do that in this hiding is
and anonymously most of the time.
That's I think what people carry forward, that there's this hidden dark world that is just,
and it's
welcoming.
there.
Yeah,
it is there, and until they enlighten enough to see that it's not the way to be, it's going to keep going on.
Yeah, and young girls starting doing that, and then it just kind of evolves. But
TikTok, I'm not a TikTok person. TikTok has sown a lot of these seeds, and I putter along on Facebook because my family's on there, and that's how I know who's doing what. But I take breaks from it all the time because I can't.
Yeah. The interesting thing about TikTok is that in China, this is a Chinese sort of device for entertainment or whatever for us here. There's strange uses of it, but in China, the Chinese government does not allow anything like what we do. It only allows achievements. So if you won a spelling bee, you put that up on TikTok. If you
keeps it
won
positive.
All of the Olympic champions, all of that, achievements. So all of the young people and everyone who want to be on TikTok are doing it to show something wonderful they've done, their best thing that they've done. But here they welcome us to show the darkest side.
It has destroyed people.
Yeah. I think if, I love democracy, but sometimes you look at a decree like that and you say, every once in a while, it would be a good thing to have only the best. Let's only see the best.
They're also taught not to question. If it's on TikTok, it's got to be true.
Yeah.
So I'm talking about the kids that end up getting sucked into it.
Yeah.
It's like you need to evaluate who is this coming from? What's this about? And don't believe in it if it doesn't feel like it's your truth.
Yeah. It brings, there is a side of it that it brings people together to have fun with something, but then it's really not exploring our best selves and not exploring our best potential, especially with young people, which is really the audience. And, the hope is that we can elevate the young demographic of our country and the world so that tomorrow.
I mean, the souls that are coming in are remarkable.
So
these kids.
Talk about that.
I mean, I'm amazed at some of them. A lot of them, there's a lot of spectrum stuff because it's almost like they fritz out in this dimension. It's so dense here. And a lot of them have that. I mean, I was shocked. Elon Musk is on the spectrum. Tim Burton is on the spectrum. Some of these people that create these amazing things. I like them or not like them. It's up to you, but they are amazing.
Yeah, we need them.
And these kids that are coming in, like that are, I think, when a lot of those kids, Columbine kids, not the Columbine kids, but the Parkland kids are in positions of power, they're going to get rid of the guns. They're going to get rid of the big old monster, war guns.
Yeah, I agree. I do feel positive about the generations that are coming, but I really feel the tomorrow will force us to evaluate democracy, and
it's coming.
And like you said, this is really reflecting the same time as the Revolutionary War. And we're here to experience it.
I mean, quantum physics says that everything is constantly in motion. So nothing can stay stagnant. The country has to grow. It has to go in a different direction or the same direction, but it has to do something.
Yeah.
And I think we're having that time now. And it's contentious.
Yeah.
And people are, I try not to talk about politics. My Southern mother would never approve of religion, politics, and I should always have my white gloves on.
Yeah.
But you can't help it. That's all that you hear.
Yeah.
It's all that's on the news.
I feel like we're not hearing news anymore. We're just hearing propaganda from everywhere. Like what is true? What has an agenda? Everything has an agenda, right?
Yes.
So it's painful, but I think abstinence seems to be the safest thing when it just gets to be too much.
Nature. Going out and sitting on a patch of grass and against a tree, something that's real.
Yeah.
Something
that's so true.
Because we live in this, I'm looking around, this is a beautiful space, but it's concrete.
Mm-hmm.
And we are living in this world where computers and all of that, you've got to counterbalance because otherwise you will lose your soul. And that we don't want to do.
And I think, and like you said, whether it's silence or music or creative art or things that enlighten really are so important, because the other stuff, it can't be trusted.
No.
It's just, you can't trust anything you hear.
And I found lately you have to catch yourself, because you'll have something on and you'll be milling around, you have it on, then all of a sudden you're like, and I'm like, why am I watching this?
Yes. And it's like,
this is ridiculous.
And you're like disgusted, and you think, well, if I wait another 10 minutes, I'm going to be more disgusted about the next story. And then it's another headline, and it just becomes one headline after another. And I remember when hearing the news from sources that felt like trusted sources.
Walter Cronkite.
Exactly. Nobody will probably know who we're talking about. But it was so great. And you also felt Gandhi, Martin Luther King, JFK were all alive. I'm older than you are. And I would watch that and hear stories about them. And there were only 2 or 3 channels at the time. And before we went to school, we would hear these stories and hear about these great people and what they were doing and the energy in the country. Yes. It was a young, vital country who had a big tomorrow.
Yes.
And
just as Kennedy came in, that what he represented was youth,
tomorrow,
young, brilliant,
But then
charming.
having someone like Martin Luther King, who had no hate in his soul, none, and Gandhi's just balance, and there's a purity of the messages and all of that. I thank my lucky stars to have that memory of how it could be.
Yes.
And I literally hold on to that.
The world was so different, but it planted seeds in us. And I remember how my grandparents would talk about things, and my dad would talk, my mother and father would talk, and my father's friends, and they had service. They were, what can we do to make this world better? Yeah. How can we contribute to do this?
And help each other.
And help each other.
Everybody helped everybody else.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, when my father passed, people came up to me at the funeral and said, do you know what your father did?
Yeah.
My wife, I couldn't work. My wife was, I had to go work, and she couldn't leave me. And your dad sat with me every day for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
So she could go to work.
Yeah.
I mean, that kind of thing where you just go selfless and service and just plain good. Plain good.
Yeah. So if you in some way had got a message or just got some vibration or information, and this is really out of the box crazy, but I'm just trying to see
crazier than the Beatles sitting in a tree.
Yeah.
Sitting in the tree looking down at me.
But for instance, say you've had some clients and it's maybe months later or something like that, and the country is looking for somebody to be president or to do something or and you get a message about this. Right. And this message is that one of these clients is the person that should do that, and that they should be encouraged.
Right.
So now you have this information. They didn't call you to make an appointment. Right. And you're kind of battling with this. What do you do? What I would
do is I would probably say, I would call them, or I would guess text, but probably call, because my voice is more persuasive, and say, the funniest thing, I had a dream about you. I got a message, and I feel like I have to tell you.
And, oh, good. So you would.
Oh, I absolutely would.
Because
absolutely.
Yeah. So I think you need to focus and concentrate on how we're going to get this country.
Get out of this mess.
Get this country on the road again. Because I really think we need to encourage just a whole other mentality about everything. And, I really,
and look for the good.
That's it.
Look for the good. I mean, say what you will. I didn't really want to talk politics, but most of the people that Biden has his heart in the right place. He loves his country. He's been in service a long time, and he deserves to be respected for what he's done.
Yeah.
And say what you will, then we move on to other things. Yeah. But people are not respecting people for the good things that they've done.
I know.
And it's so nasty and contentious.
Especially, age is a tough topic. Yeah. It's I have a lot of years I still want to live, so I'm like all into age being a good thing. But sometimes stress and lots of other things can speed up the aging. Yeah.
When he was younger, he had some pretty severe medical problems.
But like you said,
look at Mick Jagger.
It's a real it's tough when things are handled in the open, and it's tough. Tough for him and his family especially, but I think in the end there's going to be respect for people who have served. Look at the people who serve our country.
Yes.
Look at I'm really respecting police and people who protect us like I've never. I mean, I must say, I'm more and more, I think, how extraordinary this is to make that decision, you know.
I mean, and they're not paid. They don't go into it for the money.
Well,
that's for sure.
No.
It's their service.
Yeah. But I think that's part of showing appreciation. Yeah. Even if if Biden wasn't your choice, how can you still not show appreciation?
Honor who
or
he
how
is.
or if somebody does service and you think, wow, they were open to having their lives taken at any minute to do service for the country. Whether you agree in all of it or not, that human being deserves respect for that choice.
And that's when we get back to kindness.
Yeah.
I mean, everyone has a story. Everyone has pain. You don't come down here and not have karma. It's like a passport.
Right.
You have just something to work on when you're here. And the best people grow, I think people grow better if with love and with kindness than they would by sarcasm, by calling names, that's childhood stuff. I would have got knocked into next week if I said some of the things that you hear.
What about guides? I mean, you often say we all have guides.
Yes.
So describe that. Describe what that means.
Before you come to the earth plane, when you're like in the universal boardroom and you're setting up the lifetime, there are guides that come. Some are your permanent guides that will be with you from first breath to last. And then some are ones that come in to assist for different ventures that you're doing, for different things. Like if you're an actress and you want to do stage work, you will attract or draw to you guides that can inspire you and help you with that.
Good.
And say you decide later on in life you want to do something else, you want to write. There will always be guides. Best if you ask for them. You can say, come along and help me. Because it's very hard for spirit to do anything if they're not invited. They can't just take over your life. But everyone comes with an angel. We never die alone. We're never born alone. There's always guides there. And you read people who've watched a lot of death, like nurses and whatever, and they always see someone that they love, and off they go.
Yeah. The
spirit leaves the body, but it's not alone.
Yeah. So the guides are they guides? Are the guides maybe somebody that you were with in a previous
A lot of times you have
in
mastered some of them, yes. And people, sometimes the ones that you loved in this lifetime will kind of guide you along and be part of your life because they didn't get a chance to finish with you. But many of them are your soul teachers. There's something called the Akashic Records that has every thought, every lifetime of every human that's ever walked the earth, every soul. And so it's almost like you sit there and you go, okay, maybe this lifetime I'm going to do this. And a lot of times we come with the same favorite people that, our characters that we go in and out with. But there's always a master teacher and a higher guide and an angel and protectors. I work with the angelic realm. From the time I was a child, I loved angels. I always loved angels. And everyone said, oh, she looks like an angel. And I'm like, my mother goes, yeah, well, you should know her. But we have these beings and I see them a lot, especially the archangels like Metatron and Gabriel, Raphael, Uriel, and Michael, Archangel Michael. Michael is very close to the earth plane.
Oh, really?
But you see this like enormous, beautiful, metallic colored wingspan on these beings that protect, that are there. But there are others that I'm sure that they're more connected to old masters, you know, or old souls, or like old Greek gods, you know, or Egyptian, like Osiris and Isis and all. So I just feel like there's this hierarchy that are here to protect us, help us make sure we get our mission done. That's the problem. This dimension is all like a one-room schoolhouse. You have younger souls, newer souls that are doing things that we all probably did as new souls. Yet there are those that are very evolved trying to move this along a little bit. So that's why you go, oh, that's still going on. People murdering each other, people doing this. Well, yeah, until everyone has learned their lessons, it will always be a place somewhere for it to happen. There'll always be wars somewhere until every soul has had a chance to go through it.
Interesting.
It's almost like the universal truth of what we do here. And if we think, like looking at this is so remarkable, we are not the only galaxy. We are not the only solar system. We're not the only form of life.
Yeah.
It's so much more vast than we even know here.
It's true. I was going to ask about these other dimensions and how we're talking more and more about leaving the planet, going somewhere else. And it's almost an intuitive kind of thought process because it seems sometimes dangerous here on every level. And where do we go? What do we do?
And the resources that we are using up. It may not be able to sustain life after a certain point if we don't reverse it now. But I'm sure this has happened before to other planets, which is why they'll see
maybe
them
even here. I mean, it's incredible. I think the spirit, or what we come here with and what we leave with, really in the end is the ultimate guide, right? And so I have one last question is, do you think that what you do and the experience that you exchange with people and this other dimension, do you think it's in contrast or conflict to religion, or do you think it's part of that?
Probably. Because religion is a sort of structured thing that you believe this to this, and that's what you believe because that's what your truth is going to be.
Right.
And religion is pretty much created by man. What I do is created by the universe and God. And so yes and no. I mean, it's an age-old dilemma, but most Christian doctrines, there are angels in every religion, every one of them. So the angelic kind of weaves through it all. But I just know a lot of religions are so rigid. Like you have to do this and to belong. And it's not about personal freedom. It's not about highest truth. It's about conforming and forming. And they're very comforting, and it's very good for a lot of people. And I was raised with very strict religion.
Yeah. You know, I think the beauty of religion is it's a community that people can be part of and connect with each other, especially when social media is just sort of another kind of religion in a way. And
the music, there's music.
The sound,
I like music.
I think the ceremony and the community
ritual.
I love that so much. I also often say I love being in the Middle East, and 5 times a day there's a pause for prayer.
Yes.
And it's so, it happens so fluidly and easily. And people stop, they pray, they come back, like no conversation about it. It just is. And there's so the comfort in so many people doing that at the same time.
See, I find I don't judge any of them, but they would judge what I do.
Maybe not so much anymore. That's going back to that conversation, because I think people realize to have an open mind about what you do gives them other options for their lives.
And I'm sure if this were the 1500, 1600, I wouldn't be doing this, or I'd be burned at the stake.
You would be running around.
I would be on fire. So I think
so
that's
to
right.
speak. I think that was a great place to put this to the end. Thank you so much.
I love and adore you. I love and adore you.